an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 2, Episode 11, Chapter 33. Ha! I got it. In this episode, I'm so happy right now, you guys, because Jane is looking at hooking up with her hot professor. And I really just honestly am glad that there has been an alternative produced to Michael and Rafael. We just need to acknowledge other men exist. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Natalia for commissioning this episode. You guys, I want you guys to know, I get so happy when I see that this show is in my schedule for the day. Like, it's not like, you know, there are plenty of things that I love covering, but this is a show that feels a little bit like a break sometimes because a lot of what I get commissioned to cover is so heavy. And, you know, there's definitely like emotional beats and stuff in this show. Don't get me wrong, but it's soapy, it's fun, and it's just like nice to be in a world where like a lot of the folks in her life are supportive, good people who care about her, and it's just nice. So I'm just excited, and I came so close, y'all, because I had forgot. After the last recording for episode 10, let's see when that was, how far back that was. February 13th. Okay, so it was a month ago, and that is probably why. I watched this episode directly after recording, and then today, I came so close to doing the thing where I watch the next episode. Because I think that I've already recorded on this one. And I'm so glad that I like triple checked and finally was like, oh no, I never recorded on the one. Oh, I have to rewatch that because a month had passed and I think I can be pardoned for mistaking that. But don't worry, everybody. I did not watch the next one. I just almost did. I'm a very, very good podcaster. So this episode, there's a couple of things that are like the primary issues. Professor Chavez is one of them. The other big story going on here is Rafael and what's happening with him and Shamara. And I want to talk about that first, just because it's a difficult thing for me whenever the issue of like whether or not to have children turns out to be sort of a big plot point. You guys know I don't have kids. I don't plan on having kids. I have never really wanted kids. It's never been something that's like been a drive for me. I am a person who has a lot of ambitions about things that I would like to do. Not just like ambitions professionally, but also I have lots of hobbies and interests. I do a lot of creative things, and that all takes money, and that all takes time, and that all takes, you know, focus in a way that children are just like the antithesis of. And I am not in a position financially where I can have childcare. There's no way that I could continue to pursue any of these things if I were to have a child. Like, I just know it would take up all of the time that I have, because if there's anything in my life that I'm going to focus on completely, having a child, I would be absolutely obsessive. I can tell just from having a dog, like for the first time in my life, this dog has absolutely eaten up all of my attention. So having a child, I really can see how everything else just gets shoved to the side. And I really would want to be that kind of parent. So for me, it's always just been the drive to have a kid has never been enough for me to want to shelve a lot of the things that I personally want to accomplish. And I know that I would have to for at least a decade, you know? Some people can do it all. I'm just not one of them. And that's, you know, for a lot of reasons. And so for me, with Shamara not wanting to have children anymore, like she's had her one with Jane and she's done. I fucking get it, man. I really, really get it. Especially because Shamara she had Jane when she was super young. And so a good portion of her life that traditionally would have been spent just pursuing her own dreams, she didn't get to do that. And now she is wanting to do something for herself. And this is illustrated really well with this whole thing where we get a flashback of the three of them, her and her mother and Jane, all sharing the bathroom. And Jane turning on the water to do, like, she's doing her hair, her mother's brushing her teeth, and her grandmother's in the shower. And this is just like a reality of sharing a bathroom when you have family. Like, everybody's in there doing things all the time. I remember, like, coming into the bathroom to pee while my mom was in the shower and just being like, and I don't remember if I would like flush or if I would be like, hey, I peed, so you're going to want to flush because I didn't want to fuck up her shower. But like, if you have only one bathroom in the house and you're living with 3 or more people, it's just, it just happens. And there is this moment where Jane is asking, are you going to that interview today? And she says, I canceled it, actually. I just don't want to be a dance teacher. And she leans forward to spit out her toothpaste, and she spits it directly into Jane's hair. Which not only upsets Jane after she's been doing her hair for the last 10 minutes, but also irritates her to a point where she blurts out something that she feels really guilty about later, which is, maybe we wouldn't have to share one bathroom if you would just get a regular job. Which is a pretty brutal thing to say on the one hand. On the other hand, Shamara is a mother, and I'm not clear on if Alma was able to... Is it Alba or Alma? I think it's Alba, right? I don't think she's working. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know that you can get jobs even if you aren't actually a citizen, like under the table stuff. But I am not certain if she has ever actually pursued that or not. So Shamara is the primary breadwinner of the household. And yeah, that's a lot on her shoulders. That's a whole lot. And unfortunately, this is the reality of like being an adult, and especially of like raising a child, is that you don't just get to pursue things because you want them. You have got to be practical. And I just really felt for how hurt she was in that scene, but how much she can't help but acknowledge that Jane may have a point. And so, she is a dance teacher now, today, and has been for some time. She decided that she was going to put things on hold so that she could provide for her family. And it seems like it's kind of a shame because even though she did put things on hold, they're still living in this house. So she did this, but it didn't get them out of the situation they were currently in, which they're in a pretty decent situation. Like, this it's being framed as like, oh, they're all sharing a bathroom and they must be real poor. And like, I mean, if you're looking at the overall income, yeah, probably. But in terms of how things actually work in the world, this is pretty reasonable, But she was able to maintain this life, and maybe they wouldn't have been able to stay here. Maybe this is like a pretty good situation for them. Anyway, all this to say that in the present, she has decided that she is going to start to really pay attention to her singing career again. And there comes this point where she has been let go from one particular venue that she sings at. And she thinks that it's because she's not selling enough tickets anymore. But the guy tells her it's not that. I understand that family shit happens. I get it. But you have just canceled one too many times. And it's starting to feel like you just don't really take your singing seriously anymore. And she eventually gets a chance to do a concert, but it's going to be a fill-in for the night that is supposed to be her big birthday party that Rafael is throwing her. Or not Rafael, Rogelio. And, we know that actually Rogelio is planning on proposing to Shamara. But Shamara suffered a pretty terrible disappointment when Jane, they're at Rogelio's apartment because he has volunteered to watch Jane's kid. She's going to be doing a reading of her work. And she doesn't want Rogelio to watch the baby. And she keeps coming up with excuses and he keeps countering her. And really the thing that I kind of wanted to be posed as an alternative to just him watching the baby was this dude could probably get somebody to help. I know that his financial situation has changed, but it's not to a point where he couldn't pay for not even for a sitter for the day, but just an assistant, somebody to help show him how to do things and whatnot. And maybe Jane would feel a little bit more comfortable if there was a third party involved who not only could instruct him, but then maybe report back to Jane and be so he did pretty well. He paid attention. I think he's going to be okay. That sort of. But, that's not an option in this universe. So Jane really it comes down to her feeling guilty for telling him, I don't think you're ready. She doesn't want to just say those words. Even though he can tell that's what's going through her mind, he sort of leverages the fact that he knows she isn't going to want to be that blunt to guilt her into giving him Mateo for the day. So the first, alarm comes from her. There's a really good scene, you guys. She's driving, and her mother is have you seen Rogelio's Twitter? And it's all done with the automated AI voice in the car, that's reading off her texts. And it's currently trying on all of my fedoras, #hot in a hat. And it's really, really funny. This is the sort of thing where I was very glad for subtitles as well, because there's something about AI that just makes things sound unfamiliar. And I was I don't know if I would have even gotten that was what he was saying, So she, of course, is thinking this all means that Rogelio isn't paying attention to Mateo, which I've just got to say, I didn't understand. And maybe it's because I don't watch babies. I'm fully aware that I do not know what I'm talking about. But it just really seems to me, you could try on all of your fedoras and watch a baby. Pretty easily. That's not even really, you know what I'm saying? I feel I could try on all of the fedoras that I own and probably also do all the dishes. And probably also, give Pippin a bath. I don't feel that would interfere at all. There's even a point where he says something about exfoliating and loofah, and I don't know if that was meant to be that he was showering, but you can take a shower and watch a baby. You put the baby down on the, next to the shower, right? That's not completely out of the question. But she just really reacts badly to this. She calls him up, and it turns out all of those tweets were scheduled tweets, basically. Which this is one of those things that I think is so fascinating about the difference in how some celebrities handle their social media as opposed to others. There are some celebrities that are really, really hands-on. And, we've seen that Rogelio can be that way. He certainly has access to his Twitter on his phone, and he just goes in there and tweets whenever something's come up. But the fact that there are scheduled ones as well, he's really on top of his social media game, versus some others who tend to only operate through interns is always the word you hear, even though I'm not necessarily sure that that's true. But they always have somebody who's on deck tweeting very appropriate professional things, and they don't get at all personal. And just as an aside, it's the sort of thing that I think is really going to be a compelling case study in years to come. Whose whose reputation winds up being better in the long run, because I just feel personally, as somebody who does what I do for a living, oversharing comes with the territory. I get very personal on my podcast, and therefore I'm going to get very personal on my social media in the same way. And it's just not really going to be like surprising because of what I do. And then there are people who that wouldn't be built in to what they do, and they can choose whether or not they want it to be part of their brand or not. And you see the difference very much, and people make this comparison a lot, but between Beyonce and like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is huge on her social media. She is very like publicly available. You know what she's doing. You know where she is and who she's dating. You know what's going on in her personal life. She writes music that is very explicitly about her personal life. And there is like a real strong encouragement of like the parasocial relationship between her and her fans. There was like a contest that certain fans got to just come and listen to her new album early and make cookies with her at her house, which has really created this sort of like illusion that everybody who's her fan is one step away from getting to actually hang out with her because she did this thing one time. And it has really led to people feeling like they know her on a very personal level, and that's part of her appeal. And Beyonce, it's the exact opposite. She almost never posts anything personal. She is really, really reserved and private. Anything that she puts in her music about her private life, it's like extremely rare. That's why Lemonade was such a big deal, because she just doesn't post about her own shit often. And Lemonade was explicitly and only about what happened with Jay-Z cheating on her. And that was the whole album. And nobody knew that this affair had happened before the album dropped. And when the album did drop, nobody knew who it was he cheated with. And they haven't found out since. There's been a lot of theories, but nobody knows, because she has kept such a lock on all of that gossip and information and refused to participate in it. Whereas Taylor Swift, like, that is absolutely the opposite of how she handles things. So it's just a real different approach. And I'm always interested in, like, what's going to wind up withstanding the test of time the best. And it may not be that either does better than the other. You know, that may not have anything to do with it in the end. Personally, for me, I like Beyonce's approach better. Probably because I'm an oversharer. I really respect somebody who has a lot more restraint than I do. But also, I like that Beyonce is like this sort of figure that almost seems above all of that I can project my own like ideals onto. I don't want to know much about her. I want her to represent something more than I want her to like be a person. And that may be weird, but like, you know, that's kind of what works for me about her. And Rogelio, obviously, his whole thing is like being really available, telling everybody what's going on in his life, meeting fans and taking selfies on the street. Like, he is just all about his fans and being really involved in that way. And I'm just sort of curious, like, what's going to wind up happening with his career going forward, because now that he has been given the chance to come back and be the star of his own show again, is the fact that he's like not good at remembering folks' names and sort of like self-absorbed and stuff. He had that assistant that just didn't want to be friends with him. Is he going to begin to sort of like internalize that and try and be better, or, you know? Anyway, I'm so sorry. I got way off topic here, but all this to say, they're at Rogelio's house looking through his stuff to make sure that the house is like baby safe. And he comes home just as Shamara is showing Jane a ring that she found. And Jane has to tell her mother, I did hear his mom advising him to propose. And so they assume that this ring, which had belonged to his mother, is going to be what he proposes to Shamara with. But then when he comes home and catches them with the ring, in a very funny scene in which she tries to pretend that she isn't holding anything, but he calls her out. I loved that it wound up with him just being like, you didn't blow up the or the fist bump. You always blow it up, which means that you're holding something in your hand. I just really liked it being acknowledged. The ring, he actually like is like, oh, well, this was a big deal, but And you think that he's going to propose, and instead he is giving the ring to Jane as a gift for his daughter. And it's such a like bittersweet moment because she is so touched by what he's doing, but also devastated for her mother, who had a very strong expectation here. And this leads to her mother sort of wondering if this is even going to happen, which I think is part of what's getting her to this point of like, you know, fuck this birthday party. The whole thing is supposed to be, I think it's like 40 and fabulous is the theme of the birthday party. But it's clear that her reaching this age is making her feel a lot more keenly all of the things that she has been wanting to do that she hasn't gotten to, not even gotten to do, but hasn't even really had a chance to like fully explore at all, you know? I just really loved the whole theme of this, and what winds up happening in the end is that she gets proposed to at the oh my god, is it would you call it a concert? I'm not even sure if I would call it a concert or not, because she's like, she is performing, but it seems like there are people there for like drinks and dinner as well. I guess you would still call it that though. But anyway, so Rogelio goes there after she blows off the party and doesn't like really understand why he's making such a big deal out of her going, because she's feeling like, really, I think what it is, she's feeling a little bit more sensitive about her age. He is throwing this party with his own motives for proposing to her. She doesn't know that those are his motives. And so for her, the whole thing is just really like zeroing in on something that she's feeling particularly self-conscious about lately. And when they're getting like photos taken, and let's see what she say. Take 5, Alejandra. And I love that he says that to Julie. They keep doing that where he's calling them by their names, and then we get the subtitle of what their name actually is. And the people are just going along with it, just accepting that he's not going to get their name right. And they're just like, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, it's all the 40 and fabulous stuff. I never thought I'd be 40 and teaching the whip nene to a bunch of 7-year-olds. And, he's trying to cheer her up about like, the party's going to be great. I have a wonderful surprise for you, yada, 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 which gets her thinking about the proposal. But then when the ring isn't for her, she's thinking, okay, the surprise must not be that, which it turns out it is that, because we see him with Mateo doing like peekaboo with the diamond, the diamond loose that he's carrying around in a velvet pouch in his shirt pocket, like a fucking maniac. So he gets distracted because Jane calls. He turns. Mateo has swallowed the diamond, and it turns into a whole thing that leads to Jane basically yelling at him that she knew he wasn't ready to watch Mateo, that she's mad at herself for like getting guilted into letting him. And she winds up apologizing later, but it's very clear that she already had such anxieties about this. And I don't think that if this had happened with somebody else, that like if it had happened with Shamara, for example, it would just be sort of like, well, you know, things happen. But because she already was so worried about whether Rogelio was fit, she flies off the handle a little bit more than she would otherwise, because she was already really paranoid. And this leads to him talking to her about how, like, I am worried because you might be right that I'm not good with kids. And I want to have more with your mother. And what if I'm not any good with them? And I was taken really aback. It had never entered my mind that he was even thinking about having more children. And I was surprised that Jane didn't put a hand up and go, you want to have more with my mom? Do you think she wants that? Because I it's very clear to me Shamara is not in that place. That's not where she wants to go with her life. And my mom got remarried when I was married to Brendan. My mom got married like a year later or something. So I was at that point like 23, and my mom was about 43. And they had almost not gotten married because her husband was saying he wasn't sure if he was okay with just giving up on having children. And my mom had said very explicitly, that is not happening. If you want kids, I am not the one. And she's just sort of let him think it over. And he eventually decided that he would rather be with her. But it was, a real consideration. And she's turning 40. I am 39. And when I tell you, there is nothing I could want less. There was a period in my life where it was much more possible that I would be like open to having a child, even though I didn't really want one. You know what I mean? At this point, that door has firmly closed and is sealed shut. It has been soldered shut. And I really kind of felt surprised that Jane doesn't push back on him at all, because I thought it seems pretty clear. But she doesn't. I don't know why, whatever. And when he proposes and he says something about having children with her, he says, "Do you accept?" And she says, "I want to, but I don't want to have any more children. I want the next 20 years to be about me. Is that a deal breaker?" And he says, "I don't know." And this is something that drives me fucking crazy. And I know it's the show, I get it. But there are so many fucking fictions out there where a couple is ready to fucking get married, and it turns out they have not discussed children. And I can't understand it. There is no believable way in my mind that you get to a point where you are about to get married to somebody and you haven't talked about whether you would want more children. If you haven't had that conversation, I don't know where you go getting married. That's basic shit. That's first date type shit, in my opinion. You find out how people feel about that before moving forward in any other way, because otherwise it's a waste of your time if they're not on the same page as you. The only alternative is that they're not on the same page and you think you're going to be able to change their mind, which is a really gross way to start things off. Thinking that, okay, we're not on the same page, but I'm going to get my way anyway eventually because I'm going to win them over, which just don't do that, guys. It's really shady and it's not nice. And it's also just manipulative, and you're going to eventually be sort of leveraging the history of your relationship over this person in a way that's not. It's just not a way to be with somebody that you respect, allegedly. So yeah, this is just always going to bother me whenever there's this happened there's so many things I can't even name them all, but one of the big ones for me was Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where Jake and Amy are such a thing, and eventually the kids thing comes up, and it's they have never talked about it before, and I was just I am so sorry. Y'all spend all your time together, and having children has just never come up until this moment. Come on. So, I mean, that was a major factor in why I was drawn to Owen, was because he knew he didn't want kids either. And it was just it's a rare thing. A lot of men have a very strong tie with their masculinity and reproducing. And it's just this thing that they can't seem to separate, that they don't feel like they're proper men unless they have children. And I had no interest. And I was finding guys who don't care, it can be a little bit harder than you'd think. And then here he was just no, oh my God. Not only do I not feel the drive, but the idea of having children sounds so stressful to me that it's I feel panicky about it. And I was okay, yes, thank you. Okay, perfect. So I have total faith that the two of them are going to wind up together. I kind of feel like Rogelio's idea of having children is romanticized, and that he has never actually been involved on the daily with the raising of a child, and he doesn't actually want to be. I think that his concept of what it would be like to have a kid is very much based in what it is like being around Mateo, where he can just come and go as he pleases. And I don't like, Rogelio is a fundamentally selfish person in a lot of ways. And I just think that having a kid for him would be a bad idea, and that he would wind up not really liking it. You know, I just do. So I'm hoping that he gets to a point where he like sort of sees that, and that he can treat Mateo not necessarily like as his kid, but that will fill some of the void in his life there, and substitute having his own children and be like the happy medium. So, okay, let's, this fucking thing with, what's his name, who, Wesley Masters outside of the Marbella Hotel. He's talking about how like, oh, the Marbella is now tied with 2 major players in the Miami drug trade. And this guy, I love how dramatic he is telling this story, standing out here, having been evidently kicked out of the school. I don't know if he went to a different school or if he's just making money doing this sort of thing now. But whatever it is clearly getting picked up enough that it's becoming a problem, because Rafael is talking to Petra and she's like, well, we're down 40% on our like just bookings. Let's see, we're at 40% capacity and events are getting canceled. 40% capacity is really, really bad. And he says like, I'm going to float us the way that I always have. But Petra's insisting it's a bigger problem than that, and you know it. And she's like, okay, fine, but, you know, you're going to have to deal with this at some point, because he hangs up since Jane is here. And this comes up a little bit later. So Petra, there's a whole thing where we like find out the way in which her and Rafael initially got together. We knew that he saw her as his business rival's fiance, and that was part of what drew him to her. But we didn't get to see how he went about this. So first, it starts off with him saying, look, please, I know Izzy Hillcroft is a little from, you know, back in the day. And back in the day is translated as when he was a player. But she's having an art opening tomorrow. I'll go there and I'll say that this is all behind us and, you know, charm her a little. And Petra says, you really think you can charm a woman who's about to get married? And he looks at her and says, it worked with you. And we see him there and his like whole... This, you guys, look, I can't help but kind of be into this. I'm going to be totally real with you guys. This is one of those things that's so difficult because you guys know that Rafael, I have really not seen it for him a lot of the time. There's been the occasional moment where I have been like, oh, okay, I see it. But it's very fleeting. And a lot of what I didn't like about him was how suave he was, and how like polished his looks were to a point that it almost felt like artificial. Like he looks like somebody who's gotten lip fillers and eyebrow threading and stuff. And I don't have anything against that, like, you know, in principle, but I don't like the look. But the whole vibe of him here, she comes out of this room and he's just leaning against the wall looking at the phone. Like he's not making eye contact. He's looking at his phone And she steps out and he just interrupts like her walking past him with, so listen, I'd love to take you out. And she says, I'm engaged. And he says, yeah, for now. And then he walks up and he's a little too close. And he says, how's Saturday? And her phone starts ringing and she says, I have to get this. He repeats, Saturday. And she just says, I can't. And he walks around behind her and then just over her shoulder says into her ear, say yes. And I was like, oh boy, I would know better, but I can't say this wouldn't work on me. Like, the big dick energy there, that was very strong. It was. Like, you know, and I respond to that. I am not gonna pretend otherwise. I don't normally like this sort of like player approach, but there's something different about this than the way I've seen it portrayed other times. There have been times where it's like, I'm gonna charm her by like flattering her or being like witty and charming in a way that's sort of pretending to be like self-deprecating, even though I clearly have a very high opinion of myself. And there's like a falseness to all of that I really hate. This, there isn't any falseness. He is straight up like, I know you are engaged. I would like you to cheat with me. I am hot. Will you do that? And I just kind of appreciate that there's no like, yeah, just for friends. We're just going to go out to dinner as a friend thing. Like, he's just straight up clearly going, I'm seducing you. Will you let me do that? I'd like it. I think you'd like it. And the directness, I just like that. I do. So anyway, this is one of the few times where we have seen like his player days and I've been sort of like, oh yeah, all right. Now I understand how he was able to pull all of this off for so long. And of course also the fact that like, you know, he asks her out and she doesn't just walk away. She stands there and is all flustered and weird about it, but there is clear indication from the way that she's sort of like letting him continue talking. She could pick up the phone and just answer it, you know, and walk away, and it would send a very clear message. But it really feels like here she is wanting him to convince her, you know? And I'm not trying to say that like women in this position don't act this way even when they are not wanting to be convinced, just because maybe they are afraid, because that is certainly an option. But in this scene, the way she is playing it feels like she has stepped into something she wasn't expecting, and she is like mentally calculating how she's going to play it and whether this is beneficial or not. And he can tell that there is some wiggle room for her in there when he proposes this, and so he is pressing his point. So yeah. Anyway, then we have like, I really appreciated this because initially, when she answers the phone and is talking to her mother, she says, yes, he proposed, but I think I might have just caught a much bigger fish. And it's made to really make her seem like just, you know, calculating and whatnot. But then we have the scene at the art gallery, and it turns out Izzy Hillcroft is this artist who apparently Petra was super rude to at one point. Petra spilled her coffee and she screamed at her, said, "Do you know who I am?" and got her fired. And this led to Izzy making this sculpture called the Trophy Wife. And it's very clearly meant to be Petra, like literally the top of this mannequin coming out of a trophy with this grasping, greedy look on her face. And she's like, the trophy is filled with money and like gold doubloons, and her arms are draped in jewels, and she's wearing a crown, and it's honestly kind of terrible. as far as like art goes, but it makes a statement. That's true. And Izzy says, available for purchase, of course, just like the best of them, which I was like, wow, that is really brutal. But the way that they play this, like, Petra's looking at it and she is so horrified and trying to, like, she's actually clearly embarrassed at being reminded of what her behavior was like. And she says something about how Izzy was probably provoked. Or no, maybe she says I was provoked. Maybe that's what, maybe she, because I thought that she was sort of trying to justify. I'm sure Izzy provoked it by, and he says not knowing your name. That's it. So she was trying to like blame Izzy. And she says, I can fix this. I will fix this. And what she attempts to do is to get an art critic in the place. And this is meant to help like raise Izzy's profile. But it turns out Izzy's art was not ready for this kind of attention, and she really thinks that Petra actually knew and was trying to sabotage her when Petra was attempting to do the exact opposite. And so this whole thing is it's just the review is terrible. I mean, the art was pretty bad. I'm just saying. But yeah, the way that Petra tries to say, I was trying to help, there's a look on Izzy's face that to me seems like she knows Petra is telling the truth. So we go up into the office where Rafael is talking to Petra like, how could you do this? You could have talked to me about it and I could have made some calls. And she says, I wanted to take care of it myself. And he says, why? And she says, because I am not some useless trophy wife, okay? And he says, I never thought you were. And I really liked this. She just says, okay, let's not get all sentimental, all right? You stole me from your business rival. And I really appreciated her just calling that out in bald terms. Because that is like also how I am. I am not somebody who wants to just be consoled in a moment. I operate too much on logic for things like that to really help. If I feel like you're just saying something when there's very clear demonstrable proof what you're saying isn't actually really true, it doesn't land, you know? So the fact that she just kind of is like, I know you're trying to make me feel better, but let's not fucking lie about exactly how this went down. And he actually has a great answer. He says, well, that may have been why I was interested in you, but that's not what I loved about you. I loved that you were the kind of person that saved $743 on fish fillets. And he says this, and it brings up this flashback to a point when she was like first working with him at the Marbella, and she like had this feeling that they were being overcharged by the caterer, and she went to the fish market and found out that they were charging almost half of what the caterer was for the same cut of fish. And it was just like this silly thing to get so fixated on in the context of a wedding that was $100,000. But it was something that he enjoyed, that she was like paying attention to these details, things like this. And it makes a lot of sense that she was, because she clearly grew up without money. And that is the exact kind of thing she would be noticing, you know? So him saying that actually lands a lot better because he has a specific example. And we also get a really sweet scene of her getting ready to get married. She's with her mother in the limo in her wedding gown. And her mother is telling her, like, I told you not to do this, but you went and fell in love with him. So we really get the insight that her marrying him originally, she may have been interested because of his money, but she actually really cared about him by the time they got married. She was like, you know, excited about this for the sake of her emotions, as well as the fact that she was winding up married to the guy who was like sort of top of the pyramid. And I just really liked seeing that, because it's very easy to just think of her as purely mercenary. But even so, the scene where he tries to kiss her, she stops him. And when he's asking, like, but wait, why? She says, are you over Jane? And he can't answer her because he knows he's not. And she's just like, I do not want to be involved with somebody who is still into somebody else. Which also winds up being the thing with Michael's partner, whose name I can never remember. But evidently she's been having this like little thing going on, this fling with Louisa. And Louisa like recognizes the picture of Joey, who was like the driver, on a couple of like the trysts that she had with Rose. And so they put her in a position where she goes to Joey and like tries to send a message to Rose through him about like, tell her to send me donuts if she wants to talk. She'll know which kind. And when she tells the story about like how much she wants to speak to Rose, it's very clear that she still has strong feelings for Rose. And so Michael's partner is just like, that was too real. I know that you aren't over her, and I'm sorry, but like, I am not going to get more tangled up with you than I already have if you are still that far gone on this woman. It's a weird subplot to be going on, and I feel like I have forgotten to even reference it the past couple of recordings, but it's been really, really slow moving, so that's probably part of why I'm forgetting. Okay, now let's talk about Jean and her professor. Is it Dr. Chavez? I can't remember. I think it might just be Professor Chavez. And Petra, what she comes up with is to propose to Izzy that the wedding that she's going to be having at the Marbella, which she was threatening to pull out of, that they'll host it for free. The Marbella can't afford the bad press if you cancel, and your friends will stay. They'll have a great time, and they'll come back, which is good for us in the long run. And she says, I have one condition, and it turns out that its trophy wife be placed in the lobby. And I love that later on, Rafael tells her, oh, the new letterhead came in for the Marbella, and it's got the silhouette of this. Because he just got it printed as a joke. That was pretty funny. So let's talk about Jane. You guys, this is so excruciating. So Jane is into her professor. She had this sex dream. Her mom is aware and kind of trying to encourage her, and she tells her some signs to look for about how he's going to insist that she call him by his first name, and how he will tell her some stories that are not school related and very personal, be familiar with her, that there will be some physical contact that she doesn't have to initiate that was unnecessary. All of these signs are something that she sort of catalogs the next time that they meet. And it seems to be great. Like, what he asks from her is, he finds out that her father is Rogelio, and he's like, my mom is such a big fan. Would it be possible for you to set up meeting him with her? And she's like, oh yeah, I could. I'm sure I could set up you guys coming to the set. Which he brings his mother, who is just absolutely effervescent. She is so thrilled, and he has to really like explain what a big deal it is that she's acting like this, because she is just so difficult so much of the time. But the way that they like talk, it really is checking a lot of the boxes. Like, at first, Jane is sort of treating it like, I don't know that this is a date. And it doesn't seem like it's a date exactly, but it certainly feels as if there is something developing here because of them being out of the classroom. That, you know, they're having a little bit more space to talk. I love Rogelio saying because his mother can't speak. He says, no need to talk. This happens all the time. Just take my arm and I will give you a tour of the set. And she takes his arm with this adoring look and he just leads her away. And it's like, it's so great. I really enjoy seeing people fawn over Rogelio because he loves it so much, you know? And he's just such a sweet little goon. I can't help but be happy when he is happy. I just, you know. And Chavez says, I am freaking out a little. I have never seen my mom like that. You don't understand. My mom is like hardcore. I think when I grew up, I saw her laugh twice. And then they start talking about like how much she's taking from like the food area and stuff. And he like touches her arm and gestures her outside because she left her phone in the car. And so he is going to go ahead and, you know, walk her out. So they walk out and he still has his hand on her lower back. And he's saying, I haven't seen my mom this happy in a long time. Thank you so much. It means a lot. And I had fun too. And she says, me too. And he sort of starts to lean in and she thinks he's trying to kiss her. And he's not. It turns out he was reaching past her to open the car door for her. But she kisses and she winds up like kissing his shoulder in this really awkward way because she thought she knew what was happening. And he looks startled. And I love how it just immediately smash cuts to her sitting with her mom just being like, oh my God, like so embarrassed. And when her mom says, so how do you leave things? We go back to the scene and she's getting like the navigation from the AI in the car. And the car, a little more. Great. Okay. Now let's get the hell out of here. You kissed his freaking sweater. You guys, that cracked me up so bad. And she's like, I got to talk to him about it. So she does. She goes to speak to him. And I love this conversation because it's so easy to misunderstand it when you're watching it, not knowing the way he's feeling about things. So she comes in and she's like, look, I thought I was getting signals. And he says, from me? And he immediately, I really wasn't trying to because that could get me in trouble. And she's like, no. That's not what I mean. I had a crush and I projected it on you. But now that it's clear it was in my head, I'm hoping we can just move forward and pretend like it never happened. And he says, I don't know if that's possible. And now I know. He's like, because I'm into you, girl. You know, like, but it feels at the time like he is really unhappy with her. And she says, it is possible for me, really. Can we just please put this behind us? And he looks upset, but he says, we'll give it a try. However, her writing suffers. She can't help but like curb the way that she's writing because she's afraid he's going to take it the wrong way. Oh my God. And you guys, I forgot about when she reads everything out loud and she says, I want you, Jonathan, when the guy's name was Armando. I can't believe I skipped over that. Oh my God. I wanted to sink into the floor and die. I could never recover. That's the sort of thing that will wake you up in the middle of the night for the rest of your life. You'll just wake up at 3:00 in the morning and be like, I said Jonathan. I can't believe I fucking said that. But anyway, so she's trying to write, and I love she's trying to write this sex scene, and she's like saying like, oh, she trailed her hands down his chest, but in a way that was totally appropriate and something that he was very comfortable with, and just like, you know. So eventually she realizes like, I am not going to be able to do this after all. And she goes and speaks to him and is like, okay, look, I didn't want this to interfere so badly, but I think I am going to need to get a new advisor. And it's just a really great scene because it starts off with her just like saying, I'm mad at myself. but I think I have ruined this. She says, I crossed the line and now there's no turning back. And he says, are you sure that's what you want? And she says, no, but it's what I have to do. Because what happened is getting in the way of my writing. And he says, if you think that's for the best, and he's very careful. And I noticed when he said it, he was so, he like enunciated like somebody in the room was wearing a wire. You know what I mean? Like, it just felt very like, I want it clear. I am not dropping you. You are deciding, you know, like the whole thing. So she says, I do want this, so I'll see you around. And she starts to leave, and he says, wait, now that I am not your advisor anymore, I was wondering if maybe I could take you out to dinner. And you guys, this is the hottest. I know, I said the last episode, I was like, I know that there's some weirdness with him being like her superior as an advisor, but I can't help but not care. And this is so great because what he has done is fully stepped back and been like, I'm going to be as cautious as I can because I know that I am in a position of power and that this is super shady. And I have to let her make every decision based on what she knows is best for her. I cannot influence her. I cannot say, no, you need another advisor because I'm into you, and like force her out. I can't continue to pursue this while I am her advisor because that will be a problem. He is so cautious and careful. And I think that is such a turn on. Like, it's just, you know, this was something that drew me to Owen, was like when we were talking and I was still married, he was very like not flirty. And I'll tell you guys, I had been like, you know, chatting in DMs with a few other people. I'm not trying to lie. And they were real flirty right away. And it was super clear what they were trying to do. And I never got that from Owen. He was so like trying to be respectful and very, you know, and it was me who was just like, I really like this about you. You are not trying to be a fucking creep. And it was just like more points in his favor, if anything. And so for me, the way that her professor is behaving, I mean, yeah, he's not a professor anymore, I guess. Like, he was an advisor and he isn't. But this speaks so highly of like his ethics. There is just no better way he could have handled it, in my opinion. So as far as I am concerned, let's do this. Like, there's a point where he's trying to advise her about her writing and they have like another sort of sex scene thing. And she's talking to her mother about the fact that now she's like had a child. She's not really sure what the deal is with staying a virgin and waiting until marriage. Like, it feels sort of like, should I still wait? I don't know if that even matters now. And you guys know from the start, have sort of felt like you should have sex before you have the child, if anything. But she didn't. So, yeah, girl, get it. I really like the idea of her losing her virginity to somebody that she doesn't have the kind of baggage with that she does with Michael and Rafael. It's just like, it just doesn't feel as loaded. And because of that, it feels like she would be more relaxed and able to enjoy herself instead of overthinking, what does this mean? You know, like, I personally fully endorse this. So anyway, the episode ends with Michael and his partner figuring out that Muhtar is actually Rose's mother. And so that means that Rafael is Rose's half brother, I guess. But yeah, so we finally actually see Rose's face for the first time in a minute, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so she is with her mother. And it turns out that this like chip that Michael has been super helpful. The chip that was in his leg. Insane. truly bonkers. Like, that whole thing, don't get me started, you guys. Anyway, so that is the end of the episode. I've got to wrap up. But this is a really, really fun one. I am excited to see the next one and hopefully watch the first date between her and Mr. Chavez. I can't remember. For Jonathan, of course. How could I forget? And all right, guys, until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.